Hello, everyone. Tonight, we begin with a question about the smells. You can't escape those pungent, eye-watering whiffs that cling to your clothes and haunt your dreams. Picture yourself wandering a medieval town where the air hums with chatter, horse hooves, and something rancid. It's the tanner's quarter, a place where animal hides become leather through a process so foul it's practically a crime against your nose. You're about to step into their world where every day is a battle with stench and scorn. Buckle up, you might not survive this olfactory assault. So, before you get cozy, take a moment to like the video and subscribe, but only if you really vibe with what I'm doing here. Drop a comment with your city and the local time, because I'm curious where you're chilling as we dive into this. Now, dim the lights, maybe turn on a fan for that soft background hum, and let's ease into tonight's journey together. You trudge down a muddy lane, the kind where your boots squelch with every step, and the air feels thick, almost chewy. The tanning district isn't exactly the tourist hotspot of this 14th century town. No, it's tucked by the river, where the water runs brown, and the smell hits like a punch rotting flesh, sour urine, and something you can't quite name, but definitely don't want to. You're a tanner today, or at least shadowing one, and your job is to turn raw animal hides into leather for shoes belts and saddles. Sounds simple, right? Except it's a grueling, stinking nightmare that makes you question every life choice. The tannery is a sprawl of open pits, wooden racks, and workers who look like they've aged a decade in a year. You spot a grizzled tanner. Let's call him Will, knee-deep in a pit, stirring a hide with a long pole. The liquid sloshes a vile soup of water, lime, and dog dung. Yeah, you heard that right. Dog dung. It's a trade secret, Will says with a smirk, because it softens the hides better than anything else. You gag, but he just laughs, his hands stained a permanent shade of regret. This is the reality of tanning a craft that's essential, but so revolting it's been banished to the town's edges since Roman times. That's your first history nugget. Tanning's been a smelly cornerstone of civilization for over 2,000 years, from ancient Mesopotamia to medieval Europe. You try to focus, but the stench is a living thing crawling into your lungs. Will hands you a hide slimy and heavy and points to a pile of oak bark. Your next task is to layer the hide with it, letting the tannins, hence the name tanning, work their magic over months. It's backbreaking, and the bark dust sticks to your sweat like a second skin. You joke to Will that this must be why tanners are so tough, and he snorts tough, or just too stubborn to quit. That's your first chuckle, but it's short-lived. A passing merchant wrinkles his nose and hurries by muttering about filthy tanners. You feel the sting of that scorn, and it's not even your job. The quirky tidbit: some tanners believed the moon's phases affected the leather's quality. Full moon for thicker hides, new moon for softer ones. No science backs this, but you can imagine Will squinting at the sky, hoping the stars align for a better batch. Historians still debate whether tanning's low status came from the smell alone or from handling dead animals, which some religions deemed unclean. Either way, you're starting to get it. This isn't just a job, it's a life sentence to the margins. You follow Will to the river where he rinses a hide. The water's already murky. Tanners dump everything here from lime to blood. You wince thinking of the fish, but Will shrugs. Gotta eat, he says, and you realize he's not wrong. Leather keeps the town shod and saddled, yet tanners are treated like lepers. You notice kids throwing pebbles at the tannery fence, giggling. Smell like death, one yells. You want to snap back, but Will just keeps working his face unreadable. It hits you. This is his normal. The rejection, the jeers, the way even the baker won't look him in the eye when he buys bread. By midday, your arms ache, and your nose has given up trying to filter the air. You sit with Will on a rickety bench, sharing a crust of bread. He tells you about his father, a tanner too, and how the crafts pass down like a curse. "No one chooses this," he says, half joking. "It chooses you." There's your second laugh, but it's bittersweet. You're starting to see the tanner's world not just as a job, but as a strange, smelly brotherhood, bound by necessity and shunned by all. As the sun dips, casting long shadows over the pits, you feel a mix of respect and pity. These are the hands that shape the town's leather, yet they're the ones no one wants to touch. You're not done yet, though. Tomorrow you'll see more, maybe even meet Will's family, if they'll let you near. For now, you wipe the grime from your hands, the river glinting like it's mocking you. This is just the start, and already you're wondering how anyone survives this life. But they do, and you're about to find out how. You wake to the same sour stench, the kind that sneaks into your dreams and makes you think you're drowning in a vat of spoiled milk. The tannery's still there, humming with its grim rhythm, and you're back in Will's world, trudging through the muddy lanes of the tanner's quarter. Today, though, it's not just the smell hitting you. It's the weight of being an outcast, the way the town's eyes slide past you, like you're a stain on their perfect medieval tapestry. You're about to learn what it means to be needed, but never wanted. The morning's gray, the sky spitting a light drizzle that does nothing to wash away the reek. You find Will by the tanning pits, his sleeves rolled up his face, set in that same unreadable mask. He nods you over, and you join him scraping a hide with a blunt blade to remove the last bits of flesh. It's tedious, and your hands slip, earning a dry chuckle from Will. "You'd starve as a tanner," he says, and you laugh too, mostly because it's true. But the moment fades when a woman hurries by, clutching her shawl over her nose. She doesn't even glance your way, and you feel it, that invisible wall between you and the respectable folk. This is the heart of it. Tanners are shunned not just for the smell, but for what they represent. Leather's everywhere your shoes, the blacksmith's apron, the knight's saddle, yet the hands that make it are untouchable. A solid history fact anchors this: in medieval Europe, tanners were often legally barred from marrying outside their trade or living in the town center, forced to the outskirts near rivers for their water-heavy work. It's a rule as old as the guilds, dating back to the 12th century in places like London and Paris. You can almost hear the lawmakers sniffing, "Keep those stinkers away." You try to shake it off, focusing on the hide, but the rejection lingers. You notice how Will moves through the market later, buying onions and bread. The vendors take his coins, but avoid his eyes, their hands quick to pull back. You want to yell, "He's just a guy," but Will doesn't flinch. He's used to it. You're not. It's like the whole town's playing a game of "don't touch the tanner," and you're losing just by standing next to him. For a second, you wonder if you smell as bad as he does now. Probably. That's your second chuckle, but it's more of a grimace. Here's the quirky bit. Some townsfolk swore tanners could curse you with a whiff. There's no proof, of course, but old records mention whispers of tanner's blight, a supposed hex that made your crops fail if you crossed one. It's nonsense, but you can imagine a desperate farmer blaming Will for a bad harvest. Historians still debate whether this stigma was purely social or tied to religious taboos about handling dead animals. Some Christian and Jewish texts called such work impure, but the rules were murky. Either way, you're feeling the squeeze of that judgment, and it's heavier than the hides you're hauling. You follow Will to a new task, soaking hides in urine. Yes, urine. The town's chamber pots are emptied here, and you're trying not to think about whose breakfast is contributing to the mix. Will says it's for softening, but you're just praying for a breeze. As you work, a group of apprentices jogs by, shouting, "Piss hands." You bristle, but Will just flicks a glob of mud their way, missing by a mile. "Kids," he mutters, and you both laugh your third, and it feels good, like a tiny rebellion against the town's sneer. By afternoon, you're exhausted, your arms burning from hauling wet hides. You sit with Will under a scraggly tree, sharing a jug of weak ale. He tells you about the Guild, a tanners-only club that's half support group, half business. They set prices, share tools, and sometimes he admits smuggle better hides past the tax man. You raise an eyebrow, and he winks. "Gotta eat," he says again, and you're starting to see the cracks in his tough guy act. He's not just surviving. He's strategizing, finding ways to carve out a life in a world that wants him invisible. The sun's dipping now, painting the river a deceptive gold. You notice something: the other tanners working nearby don't shy away from each other. There's a nod, a shared joke, a quick hand to steady a slipping hide. They're a community bound by the same rejection you're just tasting. You think back to the market, the vendor's cold stare, and realize Will's got something the townsfolk don't, a kind of stubborn pride forged in the pits. You're not sure if you admire it or pity it, but it's real. As you wipe your hands, the river churning brown beside you, you catch a glimpse of a girl watching from the tannery fence. She's young, maybe Will's daughter, her eyes curious but cautious. You wonder what her life's like growing up in this shadow. Will doesn't say anything, just heads back to work, but you file that image away. Tomorrow, you might find out more. For now, you're stuck here in the stink and the scorn, wondering how anyone keeps going. But they do, and you're starting to understand why. You're jolted from the tanner's reeking world into a darker corner of this medieval town, where the air feels heavier, not with stench, but with dread. Today, you're not scraping hides. You're standing in the shadow of the gallows, watching an executioner prepare for his grim work. The town square hums with a restless crowd, their murmurs like bees trapped in a jar. You're here to see what it's like to wield the blade that everyone fears, to feel the weight of a job that's both sacred and cursed. The executioner, let's call him Thomas, stands apart, his broad frame cloaked in black, his face half hidden by a hood. You're close enough to see his hands steady as stone sharpening an axe on a whetstone. The scrape of metal is rhythmic, almost soothing, but it sends a shiver down your spine. You're not sure if it's the cold morning air or the reality sinking in. This man ends lives for a living. The crowd keeps its distance, their eyes flicking between curiosity and disgust. You feel it too, that urge to look away, but you don't. You're here to understand. Thomas doesn't speak as he works, but you imagine his thoughts, heavy and private. His job is ancient history. Tells us executioners were a fixture in Europe by the 13th century, often appointed by lords to enforce justice. They were skilled, trained to make death swift, whether by axe rope or sword. You watch Thomas test the axe's edge with his thumb, a small nod of approval. It's precise, almost artisanal, and you can't help but think of Will the tanner laboring over hides. Both men craft something essential, yet both are shunned. Funny how that works, isn't it? There's your first chuckle, but it's tinged with unease. You step closer, imaginary hood over your own face, trying to feel what Thomas feels. The crowd's noise fades, and it's just you, the axe and the wooden block stained dark from years of use. You're told the condemned is a thief caught stealing from the church. The law says he hangs, and you, Thomas, must make it happen. Your stomach twists, but you grip the axe tighter. This is the job. You glance at the crowd, spotting a woman sobbing, maybe the thief's sister. You want to look away, but duty keeps your eyes forward. Someone mutters, "Bloody butcher," and you flinch. They need you, but they hate you for it. Here's the quirky tidbit: executioners sometimes doubled as healers. Sounds wild, but old records show they set bones or sold hangman's rope as a lucky charm. Imagine Thomas slipping a bit of rope to a desperate farmer for a coin, both of them pretending it's normal. Historians still debate whether executioners were outcasts by choice or necessity. Did they take the job because no one else would, or were they forced into it, branded for life? You're leaning toward the latter as you watch Thomas, his shoulders squared against the crowd's glares. The moment arrives. The thief is led out, hands bound, eyes wide with terror. You stand ready, but Thomas takes over his movements, calm, almost gentle. He positions the man, whispers something, maybe a prayer, maybe an apology. The crowd holds its breath, and you do too. The axe falls clean and quick, and it's over. The crowd exhales some cheering, some turning away. You feel sick, but Thomas just wipes the blade, his face unchanged. "Gotta eat," he might say, echoing Will's grim mantra. That's your second laugh, but it's hollow. After you follow Thomas as he slips through a side street, avoiding the square. The town feels different now, its colors muted. You notice how people part for him like water around a stone. A child points, and her mother yanks her away. You want to shout, "He's just doing his job," but you know it's useless. The executioner's role is a paradox. He upholds justice, but carries its shame. You think back to the tanner's river fouled by their work and see the parallel. Both men dirty their hands so the town can stay clean. By dusk, you're sitting with Thomas outside his small house, far from the town center. He's quiet, sipping ale, the axe leaning against the wall like a tired companion. You ask while you imagine asking how he sleeps at night. He shrugs, says, "Same as you." Badly sometimes. There's your third chuckle, and it feels like a bridge between you. He tells you about the guild, a shadow version of the tanner's one, where executioners trade tips on knots or blade angles. It's a strange brotherhood, but it's his. You see a flicker of pride, just like Will's, and it hits you. Outcasts build their own worlds, small, but stubborn. As night falls, the town's lights blur in the distance. You're starting to grasp Thomas's life, the way he carries the weight of every swing. Tomorrow, you'll see more, maybe how he lives when the hood's off. For now, you sit in the quiet, the axe glinting faintly. You're not sure if you're more scared or sad. But you know one thing, this story's far from over. You're still reeling from the gallows, the echo of the axe's thud, lingering like a bad dream. But now, you're trailing Thomas the executioner through the dim streets of this medieval town. The air's cooler tonight, carrying a faint whiff of wood smoke, but it can't mask the weight of his presence. You're not watching him work today. You're seeing what it's like to live as the man behind the hood, the one everyone avoids, like a plague carrier. His life, you're learning, is a solitary dance choreographed by fear and necessity. You follow Thomas to the edge of town, where his house squats low and plain, far from the bustling market. The path is overgrown, as if even the grass knows to keep its distance. You imagine whispering to a passerby, "That's the executioner's place," and watching them scurry off. It's almost funny how a man who keeps the town's justice is treated like its darkest secret. Almost. There's your first chuckle, but it's more of a sigh. Inside the house is sparse: a table, a stool, a bed, with a thin blanket. You notice a small knife on the table, not for executions, but for carving wood. Thomas sits whittling a rough shape that might become a bird, his hands steady as ever. You're struck by the contrast, these hands that end lives also create. It's a glimpse of the man beneath the hood, and you lean in curious. History backs this up. Executioners often had side crafts like woodworking or leatherwork to supplement their pay, which was decent but irregular in the 14th century. They were paid per job, not per day, a grim gig economy. You sit well. You imagine sitting across from Thomas the fire, casting shadows on his face. He doesn't talk much, but you sense the silence isn't empty. It's heavy, filled with thoughts he can't share with the town. You wonder what it's like to be him, to know every face in the crowd, but have none call you friend. You try joking bet you get the best seats at executions, but his faint smile tells you he's heard worse. That's your second chuckle, and it feels like a tiny crack in his armor. The quirky tidbit: executioners sometimes inherited their jobs like a family curse. Sons followed fathers, not out of pride, but because no one else would marry into the trade. You picture Thomas's father teaching him the axe's swing, and it's both sad and strange. Historians still debate whether executioners were shunned more for their role in death or for the social taint that clung to them like the tanner's stench. Was it the blood on their hands, or the way they disrupted the town's polite facade? You're not sure, but you feel the isolation as you watch Thomas carve alone in his own home. Outside, the town's alive with laughter from a nearby tavern, but Thomas doesn't glance that way. You do, though, and spot a shadow by the fence. A boy, maybe a neighbor's kid, peeking at the scary man. You want to wave him over, tell him Thomas isn't a monster, but the boy bolts when Thomas looks up. It stings, and you realize this is his normal life, where even kids run. You think back to Will the Tanner, dodging jeers in the market, and see the thread connecting them. Both men are cogs in the town's machine, vital but vilified. You follow Thomas as he steps outside to check a trap for rabbits. He moves quietly, not out of stealth, but habit, like someone used to being watched. The trap's empty, and he mutters, "Figures." You laugh your third, and he shoots you a look that's almost playful. Almost. He tells you, in your imagined chat, about the Executioners Guild, a secretive group like the Tanners. They meet in hidden rooms, share tricks for quick knots, and sometimes he admits drink to forget the faces of the condemned. You see that pride again, small but fierce like Will's over his leather. As night deepens, you sit by the fire with Thomas, the wooden bird taking shape. You ask silently how he copes with the loneliness. He doesn't answer, but his carving slows, and you think of the thief's sister from yesterday, her sobs echoing. Does Thomas carry her grief too? You're starting to see it. His job isn't just swinging the axe. It's living with the aftermath. The stares, the silence. You think of the Tanner's River, fouled but necessary, and see Thomas as another kind of river, carrying the town's sins so it can sleep soundly. The stars are out now, sharp against the black sky. You're not ready to leave Thomas's world, but you sense tomorrow will show you more. Maybe a crack in his solitude, a hint of connection. For now, you watch him carve the fire crackling softly. You're not sure if you're more awed or heartbroken, but you know his story, like Will's, is about surviving the margins. And you're hooked, ready to see where it leads. You're back in the Tanner's Quarter, the familiar stench of rotting hides and urine slapping you awake like a wet rag. The river runs sluggish and brown, a mirror to the grim work happening along its banks. You're with Will again, knee-deep in the tanning pits, where the air feels like it's chewing your lungs. Today, you're not just scraping hides, you're diving into the heart of the tanner's world, the toxic, sloshing reality of their craft. This is where leather is born, and you're about to see why it's a miracle anyone survives it. The morning's damp, the kind of mist that clings to your skin and makes every smell sharper. Will's already at work hauling a dripping hide from a lime pit. You join him, your boots sinking into the muck, and he hands you a pole to stir the next batch. The pit's a bubbling stew of hides water and who knows what, probably more of that dog dung he mentioned. You gag, and Will grins. Breathe through your mouth, rookie. There's your first chuckle, but it's half choked. You're starting to wonder if your nose will ever forgive you. Stirring the pit is brutal. Your arms burn, and the fumes sting your eyes. Will explains the process. Lime to loosen hair dung to soften, then bark to tan. It's a months-long ordeal, and every step reeks. You think of the leather belt you're wearing all smooth and polished, and realize it started here in this filth. History confirms this grind. Tanning was a backbone of medieval economies, with cities like Florence and London churning out leather by the ton in the 14th century. Guilds regulated it tightly, ensuring quality, but also trapping tanners in their low status. You pause to wipe sweat from your brow, and that's when you notice the river. It's not just brown. It's a chemical soup shimmering with lime and blood. You spot fish floating bellies up and wince. Will shrugs. They're used to it. But you're not. The river's a lifeline for tanning waters needed for soaking, rinsing everything. But it's also a graveyard for anything living downstream. You joke, bet the fishermen love you guys, and Will snorts, they'd rather gut me. That's your second laugh, but it's tinged with guilt. You're complicit, stirring this poison. Here's the quirky tidbit. Some tanners used human hair in their mixes, believing it added strength to the leather. No evidence it worked, but you can picture Will tossing in a barber's sweepings hoping for a miracle. Historians still debate whether the tanning industry's environmental toll was ignored because of its profit, or because medieval folks just didn't connect the dots. Either way, you're ankle deep in the consequences, and it's grim. You move to the next task, rinsing hides in the river. The water's cold, numbing your hands, and you notice how Will's fingers are cracked, stained a sickly gray. He doesn't complain, but you see the toll, his cough, the way he squints against the fumes. You think of Thomas the executioner and his steady hands. Both men pay a price for their work, one in health, the other in soul. You try to lighten the mood, asking Will if he dreams of lavender fields. He laughs, only if they're soaking in piss. There's your third chuckle, and it feels like a small victory against the gloom. By noon, you're exhausted, sitting on a log with Will, sharing a hunk of cheese. He tells you about the guild again, how they fight for scraps of respect, like the right to sell leather at market without being spat on. You see that spark in him, the same defiance you glimpsed in Thomas's carving. These outcasts don't just survive, they push back quietly. You notice a woman nearby, maybe Will's wife, hauling water. She doesn't look at you, but her presence feels like a thread to follow. You file it away, sensing her story's part of this too. The river keeps churning, indifferent to your aching arms or Will's cracked hands. You think back to the market, the vendors sneer, and realize the river's like the tanners themselves, vital but despised, carrying the town's needs while absorbing its scorn. You spot a kid by the bank, tossing stones, and wonder if it's the same girl from before Will's daughter. She's gone before you can be sure, but the image sticks. Tomorrow, you might dig deeper into their world beyond the pits. For now, you stand stretching your sore back, the river glinting like it's mocking you. You're starting to get it. Tanning isn't just a job. It's a battle against the elements, the town, and sometimes yourself. Will's already back at work, stirring another pit, his silhouette blurred by the mist. You're not sure if you're more impressed or horrified. But you know one thing: this life, like Thomas's, is about enduring. And you're ready to see what's next. You're back with Thomas the executioner, but the axe is nowhere in sight. Today, you're stepping into his shadow world, where the hood defines him, even when it's off. The town's quiet this morning, the markets chatter a distant hum, but you feel the weight of eyes on you, or rather on Thomas, as you walk beside him. You're about to see what it's like to live behind the mask, to be the man who carries death's reputation like a second skin. This is his life, and you're slipping into its eerie rhythm. The streets are narrow cobblestones slick from last night's rain. Thomas moves with purpose, his black cloak brushing the ground, but he keeps to the edges, avoiding the main paths. You notice how people shift away. A merchant steps aside, a woman pulls her child close. It's not fear exactly, but a wary respect, like they're dodging a storm cloud. You try joking to yourself. Guess he's not on the tavern's guest list, and there's your first chuckle, but it's brittle. You're starting to feel the chill of his isolation, and it's not just the damp air. You follow Thomas to a small chapel of all places. He slips inside, and you hesitate, wondering if executioners even pray. Inside, it's dim, the air thick with wax and incense. Thomas kneels, head bowed, and you're struck by the sight: the town's grim reaper, seeking something. Forgiveness, maybe, or just a moment's peace. History gives context. Executioners were often devout, attending church despite being barred from some sacraments in medieval Europe. By the 14th century, their role was seen as both holy and profane, a paradox that kept them on the fringes of faith. You watch Thomas light a candle, his hands steady as ever, and wonder what he prays for. The priest nods at Thomas, but keeps his distance, like he's handling a hot coal. You feel a pang, even here Thomas is apart. You imagine whispering, "Bet you'd trade the axe for a handshake," and his faint smirk is your second chuckle, though it's more in your head than his. Outside, the town's waking up, and you trail Thomas to a butcher's stall. He buys meat, his coins accepted, but his gaze ignored. It's like Will the Tanner at the market, and you see the pattern outcasts move through the world, but the world doesn't touch them back. Here's the quirky tidbit: executioners sometimes perform miracles with their tools. Old tales claim their axes could ward off evil spirits if touched to a doorframe. No proof, of course, but you picture a desperate villager begging Thomas for a tap of his blade and him rolling his eyes. Historians still debate whether executioners' isolation was enforced by law or custom. Some towns had rules banning them from public spaces, but was it fear of their job or superstition about their death taint? You're leaning toward both as you watch Thomas walk his cloak, a barrier between him and the world. You're with him now, at the town's edge, where he checks a small garden. Turnips, herbs, a stubborn patch of life. He weeds with the same precision he uses on his axe, and you're struck by the care. You joke, "What's next, knitting?" and imagine his dry laugh. That's your third chuckle, and it feels like a bridge, however shaky. He mutters about the soil, how it's better here than in the square's blood-soaked dirt. You think of the Tanner's River, poisoned by their work, and see Thomas's garden as his rebellion, a refusal to let death define him. Later, you sit with him by a stream far from prying eyes. He pulls off his hood, revealing a face that's ordinary. Tired eyes, a scar on his jaw, nothing monstrous. He tells you, well, you imagine him telling you about the guild, how executioners from nearby towns meet to share stories, not just of blades, but of living with the stigma. They laugh, he says, because what else can you do? You see that spark, like Will's pride in his leather. And it hits you. Outcasts carve out meaning where the town offers none. the sun's climbing, casting long shadows. You notice a girl watching from a distance, maybe the same one from Will's tannery, or maybe not. She's gone before you can be sure, but her presence feels like a thread connecting these worlds. You think back to the gallows, the thief's sister sobbing, and wonder if Thomas ever sees her face in his dreams. His life, like Will's, is a balance of duty and defiance, and you're starting to grasp its cost. As the stream gurgles, you sit in the quiet Thomas cleaning dirt from his nails. Tomorrow, you might see more. Maybe a crack in his solitude, a hint of who he is beyond the hood. For now, you're here feeling the weight of his world. It's not just the axe or the stairs. It's the way he keeps going, planting turnips, lighting candles, living. You're not sure if you're more awed or unsettled, but you're hooked, ready for what's next. You're stepping away from Thomas's quiet garden, the executioner's world, still heavy on your shoulders, but now you're weaving through the broader tapestry of this medieval town. The air's thick with the smells of baked bread and horse dung, a far cry from the tanner's stench or the gallows' dread. Today, you're not laboring or wielding an axe. You're exploring the cruel edges of society itself, where tanners and executioners are both needed and despised. You're about to see why this town keeps its outcasts close, but never lets them in. The market's alive, stalls piled with apples cloth and iron tools. You wander invisible for once, watching the dance of buyers and sellers. But your eyes catch on the gaps. Will the tanner lingering at the edge, his leather sold, but his presence barely tolerated. A man who might be Thomas's brother, hooded and silent, buying rope. The town needs their work leather for shoes, justice for order. But it spits on the hands that provide it. You mutter to yourself, talk about biting the hand that feeds you. And there's your first chuckle, sharp with irony. History lays it bare. Medieval society was a rigid hierarchy with tanners and executioners near the bottom, alongside gravediggers and prostitutes. By the 13th century, guilds and laws cemented their status, barring them from honest trades or social circles. They were essential cogs, yet treated like rust. You see it in the baker's quick nod to Will, his hand snatching coins without a word. You feel the sting, like you're the one being dismissed. And it's not just personal, it's structural. A machine designed to keep outcasts out. You drift to the town square, where a crowd's gathered for a minor spectacle, a debtor being shamed in the stocks. They jeer, tossing rotten cabbage, but you notice something. No one mentions the executioner, who'll punish worse crimes, or the tanner, whose leather binds the debtor's shoes. It's like they're ghosts, vital but erased. You joke, bet they'd miss Will if their boots fell apart. And that's your second chuckle, but it's tinged with frustration. You're starting to get why this system thrives on hypocrisy. The quirky tidbit: some towns marked outcasts with symbols. Tanners wore yellow patches, executioners red gloves. No proof for this town, but you imagine Will with a bright badge, like a medieval scarlet letter. And it's both absurd and grim. Historians still debate whether this ostracism was purely economic, keeping trades exclusive, or rooted in deeper fears of pollution from death and decay. You lean toward both as you watch a priest bless the crowd, his eyes skipping over Will's stall. You move to the riverbank, where the tanner's pits churn out their toxic brew. A fisherman curses upstream, his net's empty, and you feel the ripple effect. The town relies on the river, just as it relies on Will's leather, yet both are poisoned by the same system. You think of Thomas, his garden, a small defiance against his role, and see the parallel. These men aren't just outcasts. They're scapegoats absorbing the town's guilt so it can pretend to be clean. You try a joke, guess they're the town's dirty laundry, and there's your third chuckle, but it lands heavy. By afternoon, you're sitting on a low wall, watching the town's rhythm. You spot a girl, maybe Will's daughter, maybe not, selling scraps of leather at the market's edge. She's ignored like her father, but her chin's high defiant. You think of Thomas's candle in the chapel, Will's pride in his guild, and realize something outcasts don't just endure. They adapt, carving out space in a world that rejects them. It's not rebellion, not yet, but it's a quiet refusal to disappear. You wander back to the square, where the debtor's been freed, the crowd dispersed. You notice a tanner's apprentice, young and wiry, bartering with a shoemaker. He's bold, louder than Will, and you wonder if he's the future, a hint of change. You think back to the river, fouled but flowing, and see the town as a river, too, carrying its outcasts along, unable to let them go. Tomorrow, you might dig deeper into their lives, maybe meet that girl, or see Thomas beyond his hood. For now, you lean against the wall, the sun warm on your face. The town hums, oblivious to the hands that keep it running. You're starting to grasp the cruelty of it, the way it needs Will and Thomas, but buries them in shame. It's not just their story, it's the town's, and you're hooked, ready to unravel more. You're back in the tanner's quarter, the air thick with that familiar sour bite that makes your eyes water before you even reach the pits. The river gurgles nearby, brown and unapologetic. But today, you're not stirring hides with Will. You're slipping into the quieter corners of his life, the hidden world of his family, where the stench of tanning follows like an unwanted guest. You're about to see what home means for an outcast, and it's a mix of warmth, struggle, and secrets that cling as tightly as the smell. The sun's barely up, casting a pale glow over the tanner's ramshackle houses, tucked far from the town's heart. You follow Will down a dirt path to his home, a low structure of wood and thatch, sturdy but worn. The door creaks as you step inside, and you're hit with a surprising warmth, not just from the small fire crackling in the corner, but from the life here. There's a woman, let's call her Agnes, kneading dough, and a girl, yes, the one you've glimpsed before, mending a torn shirt. This is Will's family, and you're an invisible guest in their world. Agnes glances at Will, her smile tired but real, and you feel a pang. She's part of this too, carrying the tanner's stigma without ever touching a hide. History tells us this was common. Tanners' families were as shunned as the workers, often unable to marry outside the trade or join respectable guilds. By the 14th century, entire neighborhoods were tanner only, like this one, a community bound by necessity. You watch Agnes sprinkle flour, her hands steady, and wonder how she keeps going when the town scorns her husband's craft. You settle by the fire. Well, you imagine settling and notice the girl, maybe 12, eyeing you curiously. Her name's Ella, you decide, and she's got Will's stubborn jaw. She's quick with her needle, but her eyes dart to the door like she's waiting for something. You joke to yourself, bet she's plotting her escape from the smell, and there's your first chuckle, but it's soft. Ella's life is no joke. Born into this outcast world, she's already learning its rules. You think of Thomas the executioner, alone in his garden, and see the contrast Will has, this a family, however strained. The quirky tidbit tanners' wives sometimes sold. Tanner's salve, a homemade balm for cracked hands made from leftover hide grease. No proof it worked. But you picture Agnes stirring a pot of it, muttering about fools who pay for stink. Historians still debate whether tanner families were ostracized for practical reasons, smell disease fears, or because their work touched on taboo ideas of death and impurity. You're leaning toward a mix as you watch Agnes shoo Ella to fetch water, her voice sharp but loving. You notice the house's details, a shelf with chipped pottery, a blanket patched too many times. It's not poverty exactly, but it's a life scraped together. Will sits cleaning his boots and tells Agnes about a new guild rule: higher taxes on leather sales. She snorts, "They'll bleed us dry before we smell better." You laugh your second chuckle, and it's real, a glimpse of their resilience. But you also see the strain the way Ella listens, her needle pausing. She's absorbing this world, and you wonder what she dreams of beyond it. Later, you follow Ella to the river, where she fills a bucket. She's quiet, but you catch her humming a tune that feels defiant against the river's grim flow. You think back to the market, the vendors sneer at Will, and realize Ella faces it too, maybe worse as a girl. You want to tell her she's tougher than the townsfolk, but she's already trudging back, water sloshing. You joke, bet she could outstare a knight, and there's your third chuckle, but it's tinged with admiration. Back inside, Agnes serves a thin stew, and you imagine joining them, the fire's warmth easing your bones. Will talks about the pits, how a new lime mix might speed the process. Agnes nods, but her eyes are on Ella, who's silent, picking at her food. You sense a secret here, maybe Ella's dreams, maybe something heavier. You think of Thomas's candle in the chapel, his private defiance, and see Will's family as another kind of rebellion. They love, they endure, despite the town's scorn. As dusk falls, you sit outside with Will, the stars peeking through a cloudy sky. He whittles a stick like Thomas with his wooden bird, and you see the thread connecting them. Outcasts finding small acts to claim as their own. Ella's silhouette lingers in the doorway, and you know her story's part of this, a thread you'll follow later. For now, you're here in the warmth and weight of Will's home, feeling the push and pull of a family bound by a hated trade. Tomorrow, you might see Thomas again, or dig deeper into Ella's world. You're not sure, but you're hooked, ready for more. You're back, with Thomas, the executioner, slipping through the quiet edges of the town as dusk paints the sky in bruised purples. The weight of his hood, even when it's off, seems to pull at him, and you feel it too, like a shadow you can't shake. Today, you're not at the gallows or in his lonely garden. You're uncovering the forbidden bonds he dares to form, the secret friendships that keep him human in a world that calls him monster. You're about to see the cracks in his isolation, and it's a fragile, hidden light. The air's cool, carrying the faint tang of wood smoke as you follow Thomas down a narrow alley, far from the market's clamor. He moves like a ghost, his cloak blending with the lengthening shadows. You're headed to a tavern, not the lively one in the square, but a smaller, rougher place where the town's outcasts gather. You half joke to yourself, bet they don't check IDs here, and there's your first chuckle, but it's tinged with nerves. This is Thomas's secret, a place where he's not just the executioner. Inside, the tavern's dim, lit by greasy candles. The air smells of sour ale and damp wool, and you spot a mix of faces: grave diggers, a tanner's apprentice, a woman who might be a healer or worse. Thomas nods to a man at a corner table, a wiry fellow with a scarred cheek. Let's call him Hal, a butcher who doesn't flinch at blood. They clasp hands, brief but real, and you feel a jolt. This is friendship, forbidden by the town's unwritten rules. History backs this up. Executioners often form tight-knit circles with other dishonest trades, creating shadow communities. By the 14th century, especially in larger towns where outcasts clustered, you sit well. You imagine sitting near Thomas and Hal, listening as they talk in low tones about a botched hanging in a nearby town. Hal laughs. Thomas doesn't, but his eyes soften. You see it, this is his refuge, a place where the hood doesn't define him. You try joking bet. You're the life of the party, and imagine Thomas's dry smirk. That's your second chuckle, and it feels like a small victory, like you're in on the secret. The quirky tidbit: executioners sometimes traded relics with allies, like a knot from a noose believed to bring luck. No evidence it did, but you picture Hal slipping Thomas a coin, for one, both grinning like kids. Historians still debate whether these bonds were purely practical, shared stigma, shared survival, or something deeper, a defiance of the town's moral code. You lean toward the latter as you watch Thomas pass Hal, a jug of ale, their shoulders brushing. The tavern's hum is a shield, but you notice a newcomer, a young man staring at Thomas. He's not hostile, just curious, but Thomas tenses his hand, pausing on the jug. You feel the risk even here. He's not fully safe. You think of Will's family, their warm but strained home, and see the parallel. Thomas's friendships are a lifeline, but they're fragile, built on borrowed time. You want to whisper, "You're not alone," but the moment passes, and the young man looks away. Later, you follow Thomas outside, where he and Hal linger by a crumbling wall. Hal talks about his daughter, how she wants to marry a weaver. Thomas listens, nodding, and you realize he's not just hearing, he's carrying Hal's hopes, like he carries the town's sins. You joke, bet you're great at keeping secrets, and there's your third chuckle, but it's soft, respectful. You're starting to get it. These bonds are Thomas's rebellion, his way of saying he's more than his acts. The night deepens, stars sharp above. You think back to the Tanner's River, fouled but vital, and see Thomas's friendships as another kind of river, murky, hidden, but keeping him afloat. You spot a shadow nearby, maybe Ella, Will's daughter, or just a trick of the light. It's a reminder of the threads tying these outcasts together, tanners and executioners alike. Tomorrow, you might see more of their defiance or dig into Ella's world. For now, you stand with Thomas, the tavern's glow fading behind you. Hal claps his shoulder, then slips away, and Thomas is alone again, but not entirely. You feel the warmth of that handshake, the weight of that jug passed between them. His life, like Will's, is a balance of duty and quiet resistance, and you're hooked, ready to follow the next thread. You're weaving through the underbelly of this medieval town where the air feels charged like the moment before a storm. The tanner's stench and the executioner's shadow linger in your mind, but today you're stepping into something bolder. The rebels among the rejects, the outcasts who dare to push back against the chains of their status. You're not in the pits or at the gallows. You're among those who whisper defiance, tanners and executioners alike, carving out sparks of resistance in a world that wants them silent. The morning's crisp, the market just waking with the clatter of carts. You're trailing a young tanner's apprentice. Let's call him Jem, who you spotted before, bold and loud at the market's edge. He's wiry with hands already stained from the pits, but his eyes burn with something fierce. You follow him past the tannery, where Will's stirring a vat, to a hidden clearing behind a crumbling barn. A small group waits another tanner, a gravedigger, and to your surprise, Hal, Thomas's butcher friend from the tavern. This is no ordinary meeting. You mutter, "What's this, the Outcast Avengers?" And there's your first chuckle, but it's edged with excitement. Jem speaks low, his voice sharp, about dodging guild taxes on leather sales. The others nod, sharing tricks, hiding good hides, bribing a lax guard. You feel the thrill of it, like you're in on a heist. History gives context. By the 14th century, outcast trades like tanners and executioners often skirted regulations, forming underground networks to survive oppressive guilds and laws. These weren't revolutions, but quiet rebellions chipping away at the system that kept them down. You watch Jem pass a small pouch, maybe coins, maybe something else, and feel the pulse of their defiance. You lean in imaginary cloak tight as Hal mentions Thomas. Not by name, but you know it's him. Someone who knows knots and might help with a smuggler's rope. You grin, thinking of Thomas's steady hands, and joke bet he'd tie a better bow than the mayor. That's your second chuckle, and it feels like you're part of their secret. But there's risk here. A wrong word, a nosy guard, and this group could face fines or worse. You think of Will's family, Ella's wary eyes, and wonder if Jem's boldness could drag them all down. The quirky tidbit, some outcasts left coded marks on goods, like a tanner's scratch on leather, to signal resistance or mark untaxed wares. No hard proof for this town, but you imagine Jem carving a tiny spiral on a hide, smirking. Historians still debate whether these acts were organized rebellion or just survival tactics. Did Outcasts dream of upending the system, or just of eating better? You lean toward both as you watch the group disperse their whispers, fading into the morning mist. You follow Jem back to the tannery, where he slips into work like nothing happened. Will gives him a look, maybe suspicious, maybe proud. You sense a tension. Jem's pushing boundaries. Will might not dare. You think of Thomas's tavern talks, his guarded warmth with Hal, and see the parallel outcasts rebel in small ways, but they're tethered by duty family fear. You joke rebels by day, laundry by night, and there's your third chuckle, but it's soft, respectful of their tightrope walk. By noon, you're sitting on a barrel watching Jem barter at the market. He's smoother now, charming a shoemaker, while slipping him an extra hide untaxed, you bet. A guard lingers nearby, and your heart skips, but Jem's unfazed, tossing a casual joke about the weather. The guard moves on, and you exhale. You think back to the river, fouled by the tanner's work, and see this rebellion as another kind of river, murky, dangerous, but flowing towards something. Freedom, survival. You're not sure. You spot Ella nearby, selling leather scraps. She watches Jem, her expression unreadable, admiration or worry. You wonder if she knows about the clearing, if she's part of this too. You think of Thomas's candle Will's whittling and realize these rebels aren't just fighting the town, they're fighting to be seen as human. It's not loud, not yet, but it's there. In Jem's swagger, Hal's nod, Ella's quiet stare. As the sun climbs, you linger at the market's edge, the town's hum, a backdrop to your thoughts. Tomorrow, you might see how this rebellion grows or return to Thomas's world. For now, you're here feeling the spark of their defiance, the way it burns against the town's cold shoulder. It's not just survival. It's a claim to exist, and you're hooked, ready to see where it leads. You're back in the tanner's quarter, where the air still bites with that sour, eye-stinging reek. But today, there's a shift in the rhythm. The river churns as always, brown and heavy, but you're not wading through Will's pits or dodging market sneers. You're witnessing the tanner's craft evolve, a slow, gritty push towards something less brutal, driven by necessity and a flicker of ingenuity. You're about to see how outcasts adapt, turning their cursed trade into something that just might earn a sliver of respect. The morning's hazy, the sun struggling through a veil of clouds. You find Will at the tannery, but he's not stirring the usual vats of lime and dung. He's with Jem, the bold apprentice, and they're tinkering with a new setup, a row of shallow troughs, filled with a darker, less foul liquid. Will explains, his voice low, but eager, that it's a mix of oak bark and rainwater, no urine needed. You raise an eyebrow, and Jem grins, less stink, same leather. There's your first chuckle, but it's tinged with hope. This could change things. You kneel by a trough, the liquid cool against your fingers, and listen as Will describes the idea: faster tanning, cleaner process, maybe even a chance to sell at better markets. It's not a revolution, but it's a step born from years of choking on fumes. History nods along by the late 14th century. Some European tanners experimented with vegetable tanning, using tree bark over animal waste to improve quality and cut costs. Guilds were slow to adopt it, clinging to old ways, but outcasts like Will had less to lose. You watch him adjust a hide, his stained hands precise, and feel a spark of pride. The work's still grueling hauling bark, grinding it into powder, stirring troughs until your arms scream. You try it, your shoulders aching, and joke, "Bet this is why tanners have such great biceps." Will snorts, and that's your second chuckle, a shared moment in the muck. But you notice the river nearby still fouled from older pits, and realize this change isn't a cure. The town won't suddenly embrace Will. The stench lingers, and so does the stigma. A passing merchant wrinkles his nose, muttering, "Still tanners," and you feel the familiar sting. Here's the quirky tidbit. Some tanners believed crushed acorns in the mix made leather glow under moonlight. No proof, but you picture Jem sneaking acorns into a trough, half serious, half daring the stars. Historians still debate whether these innovations came from outcast tanners or wealthier guilds. Did the margins drive progress, or just copy it? You lean toward the former as you watch Will and Jem, their faces lit with cautious optimism, working like they're betting on a future. You follow them to the market later, where Jem barters a small batch of this new leather. He's bold as always, but careful, avoiding the guild's prying eyes. You think of the rebels meeting in the clearing, Jem's pouch of coins, and wonder if this cleaner process is part of their defiance, a way to slip past taxes or prove their worth. A shoemaker tests the leather, nods, and pays without a sneer. It's small, but it's something. You joke, "Next stop, Royal Saddles," and there's your third chuckle, but it's warm, like you're rooting for them. By afternoon, you're back at the tannery, sitting on a log with Will. He's quieter now, staring at the river. He tells you, well, you imagine him telling you about his father, who died coughing from pit fumes. This new method, he says, might have saved him. You see Ella nearby hauling water, her eyes on Jem. You wonder if she dreams of a tannery that doesn't choke her family, or something else entirely. You think back to Thomas's garden, his small act of life against death, and see Will's troughs as a parallel, a refusal to let the trade be only poison. The sun's dipping, casting long shadows over the troughs. You notice other tanners watching, some skeptical, some curious. Change is slow, and the guild might crack down, but for now, Will and Jem are planting a seed. You think of the river, still dirty but flowing, and see this craft as another kind of river, evolving, carrying hope alongside its burdens. Tomorrow, you might return to Thomas, or follow Ella's thread. For now, you stand stretching your sore arms, the tannery humming with its new rhythm. You feel the weight of Will's work, the way it's both curse and lifeline, and the faint promise of something better. It's not redemption, not yet, but it's progress, and you're hooked, ready to see what grows. You're back with Thomas the executioner, standing in the gray light of dawn, where the air feels sharp and heavy with the promise of something final. The town's quiet, still rubbing sleep from its eyes, but you're at the gallows again, the wooden platform creaking under Thomas's weight. Today, you're not just watching, you're feeling the weight of his last cut, the final job that marks a turning point in his shadowed life. This is his craft at its most brutal, and you're about to see what it costs him to swing the axe one more time. The square is nearly empty. Just a few onlookers, guards a priest, a sobbing woman clutching a rosary. The condemned is a man older, his face weathered, accused of treason. You don't know his story, but you feel the tension like a rope pulled taut. Thomas stands ready, his axe gleaming, his hood hiding all but his eyes. You're close enough to see them steady but tired, and you wonder what this moment means to him. You mutter, "Bet he'd rather be carving that wooden bird," and there's your first chuckle, but it's hollow, swallowed by the morning's chill. Thomas checks the block, adjusts the man's position, with a gentleness that feels out of place. The priest murmurs a prayer, and you think back to Thomas's candle in the chapel, his private plea for peace. History anchors. This executioners in medieval Europe were often seen as agents of divine justice, their work sanctioned by church and state, yet they carried the moral stain. By the 14th century, some refused jobs risking their own lives, but Thomas hasn't walked away, not yet. You watch him grip the axe, his knuckles pale, and feel the weight of every swing he's ever made. The moment comes. The man kneels whispering something, maybe a name, maybe a curse. Thomas raises the axe, and you hold your breath, your heart loud in your ears. The blade falls clean and final, and the crowd exhales. You flinch, but Thomas doesn't. He steps back, wiping the axe with a rag, his movements mechanical. You want to ask him what he feels, but his silence is a wall. You think of Will's new tanning troughs, his push for a better way, and wonder if Thomas dreams of an escape too. You joke, maybe he'll open a bakery, and that's your second chuckle, but it's more wishful than funny. The quirky tidbit. Some executioners kept tallies of their jobs, carving notches into a staff or beam. No proof Thomas does, but you imagine him marking a hidden plank, each notch a ghost. Historians still debate whether executioners felt guilt or pride in their work. Were they haunted, or did they see themselves as craftsmen? You lean toward both as you watch Thomas linger, staring at the block like it's speaking to him. The crowd disperses, but the woman stays her sobs quieter now. You realize she's the man's wife, and her grief cuts through you. Thomas sees her too, and for a moment, his shoulders slump. You think of his tavern talks with Hal, those stolen moments of warmth and wonder if this job will break him. You follow him as he leaves the square, his steps slower than usual. He doesn't go home or to the tavern, he heads to the stream where you've sat before, kneeling to wash his hands. The water's clear here, unlike the Tanner's River, but you know it can't wash away what he carries. You sit well. You imagine sitting beside him. The stream's gurgle, a soft counterpoint to your thoughts. He pulls off his hood, his face raw in the dawn light. You want to ask if this was his last job, if he's done, but he just stares at the water. You think of Jem's rebellion, Ella's quiet strength, and see Thomas at a crossroads. He mutters, "Enough's enough," and you're not sure if it's to you or himself. You joke, bet the turnips need you more, and there's your third chuckle, soft and hopeful. The sun's rising, painting the stream gold. You spot a shadow nearby, maybe Ella, maybe just a deer, but it's a reminder of the threads tying this town together. Thomas's life, like Will's, is a balance of duty and defiance, but this cut feels different, like a door closing. Tomorrow, you might see what he does next, or follow the Outcasts' quiet fight. For now, you're here, the stream song mixing with the ache in your chest. You feel the weight of Thomas's axe, the way it's both tool and chain, and the faint hope that he might lay it down. It's not over, but it's a turning point, and you're hooked, ready for what follows. You're stepping away from Thomas's heavy silence by the stream, the echo of his final axe swing still lingering like a half-forgotten dream. The town's waking now, its rhythm of clattering carts and distant shouts pulling you back to the broader world of the outcasts. Today, you're not in the tannery's stench or the gallows shadow. You're celebrating the quiet defiance of tanners and executioners, the stubborn resilience that lets them carve out lives despite the town's scorn. You're about to see how they endure, and it's a spark that feels like victory. The morning's bright, the air sharp with the promise of autumn. You wander to the tanner's quarter, where the river still runs brown, but seems less oppressive today. Will's at his new troughs, the cleaner mix, bubbling softly, and Jem's nearby, joking with another apprentice. You catch Ella's eye. She's hauling a bucket, but pauses, her smile quick and fierce. You feel it, these people aren't just surviving, they're claiming their space. You mutter, "Take that, snooty merchants," and there's your first chuckle light with admiration. You linger, watching Will teach a younger tanner how to grind bark. His hands cracked and stained, move with a craftsman's pride, and you see the defiance in it, not loud, but steady. History backs this up. Outcast trades like tanning often preserved skills that respectable guilds overlooked, passing knowledge through generations. By the 14th century, tanners' innovations like vegetable tanning were quietly reshaping the trade, even if the town didn't notice. You watch Will nod at the apprentice's work, and it's like he's saying, "We're still here." You drift to the market where Jem's bartering again. His voice bold but careful. He sells a batch of the new leather, and the shoemaker pays without a grimace, a small win. You think of Thomas, his hidden tavern talks with Hal, and see the parallel outcasts build their own networks, their own pride. You joke, bet Jem's got a fan club by now, and that's your second chuckle, warm with the sense that they're winning inch by inch. The quirky tidbit: some tanners carve tiny symbols into their tools, not for magic, but to mark their work as theirs. A quiet "I made this." No proof. Will does, but you picture him etching a spiral into his pole, a secret signature. Historians still debate whether Outcast's resilience was born of necessity or a deeper refusal to be erased. Were they just surviving or claiming identity? You lean toward the latter as you watch Ella slip a leather scrap to a poor woman. No payment, asked, her chin high. You follow Ella back to the tannery, where she hums that defiant tune you've heard before. She's young, but you see her strength forged in the same fire as Will's pride and Jem's rebellion. You think of Thomas's garden, his wooden bird, and realize these axe carving, teaching, giving are their defiance. They're not tearing down the town's walls, but they're building their own brick by quiet brick. You joke, watch out, they'll start their own guild, and there's your third chuckle, but it's respectful, like you're cheering them on. By noon, you're sitting on a fence, watching the tannery hum. You spot a man who might be Hal, buying leather, and wonder if Thomas is nearby, maybe watching too. The outcast worlds are woven together. They're tanners, executioners, butchers, each pushing back in their way. You think back to the river, fouled but vital, and see their lives as another river, carrying pain, but also purpose. They're not heroes, not in the town's eyes, but there's something stronger, people who refuse to vanish. You wander to the town's edge, where the air's cleaner, and pause by Thomas's stream. It's clear, unlike the tanner's river, and you imagine him here washing his hands, maybe after that last job. You see Ella's smile, Jem's swagger, Will's steady hands, and feel their defiance like a pulse. Tomorrow, you might explore their legacy or linger with Thomas's choice. For now, you're here, the sun warm, the town's hum, a backdrop to their quiet fight. They're outcasts, yes, but they're alive, and you're hooked, ready to see what they leave behind. You're stepping back from the tannery's stubborn hum and Thomas's quiet stream, the pulse of Outcast defiance still thrumming in your chest. The town's alive today, its market buzzing, its river flowing. But you're not tied to one place now. You're tracing the legacy of the lowly, the tanners and executioners whose hands shaped this world while the world looked away. You're about to see how their mark endures, not in grand statues, but in the small, stubborn ways they change the town's rhythm. This is their story's echo, and you're walking its faint but steady path. The afternoon sun hangs low, casting golden slants across the cobblestones. You wander to the market, where a shoemaker's stall displays leather so fine it catches the light. Will's leather, or maybe gems from those cleaner troughs. You linger, watching a merchant buy a pair of boots, his fingers tracing the stitching. He doesn't know the hands that made it, the pits that birthed it, but you do. You smirk, bet he'd faint if he saw the river. And there's your first chuckle, soft with the irony of it all. History weaves this thread. Tanners and executioners, though shunned, were linchpins of medieval life. By the late 14th century, leather was in everything armor books. Saddles and executions kept the social order tight. Their work outlasted them, embedded in the town's daily grind. You see it in the shoemaker's craft, in the rope holding a cart's load, maybe tied by Thomas's practiced knots. Their legacy isn't loud, but it's deep like roots under the town's foundations. You think of Will's pride, Thomas's garden, and feel their quiet impact. You drift to the town square, where the gallows stand empty today. A child plays nearby, oblivious to the block's dark stains. You wonder if Thomas's last cut, that final swing, marked his exit from this life, or if he's still here carving birds, tending turnips. You think of Ella, her fierce smile, and imagine her selling leather years from now, maybe with less scorn. You joke she'll run the market someday, and that's your second chuckle, warm with hope for her fire to reshape things. The quirky tidbit: some towns named streets after trades, even the lowly ones. London had a tanner's lane, though it was far from posh. No proof here, but you picture a future where Ella's children walk a tanner's way, heads high. Historians still debate whether Outcasts' contributions were ever acknowledged. Did townsfolk see their value or just their shame? You lean toward the former, faintly, as you watch a guard's leather belt glint, crafted by hands like Will's. You move to the river, its brown flow, a constant in this story. It's still fouled, but you notice something a few tanners use. Will's troughs now, their pits less toxic. It's slow, but it's change, a ripple from Jem's rebellion, Will's ingenuity. You think of Thomas's tavern talks, Hal's handshake, and see their legacy too, not in blades, but in bonds that held them up. You joke, they built a town within a town, and there's your third chuckle, respectful of their hidden world. By dusk, you're sitting on a hill, overlooking the town, its lights flickering like stars. You see Ella's silhouette at the tannery, Jem's bold stride, Thomas's stream glinting. Their lives, their work, their defiance, they're woven into this place, even if the townsfolk don't say it. You think back to the river, carrying poison, but also life, and see their legacy as another river flowing through time. They were needed, despised, and yet they endured, leaving marks in leather, in order, in the stubborn act of living. You feel a quiet awe, not for heroes, but for people who kept going. Tomorrow you'll close this story, let it fade gently. But for now, you're here, the town's hum softening below. You see Will's hands, Thomas's eyes, Ella's tune, and no, their story isn't just theirs. It's the town's, etched in its bones. You're hooked, ready to carry their echo forward one last time. You're easing away from the town's bustling heart. Its market cries and rivers churn, fading into a gentle hum, like a lullaby whispered by the evening breeze. The stars are peeking out soft pinpricks in a velvet sky, and you're no longer bound to the tannery's sting or the gallows' weight. You're drifting now, cradled in the quiet legacy of Will Thomas Ella and Jem the Outcasts, whose hands and hearts left marks on a world that tried to forget them. This is the close of their story, a tender fading of their light meant to soothe you into rest. The air is cool, brushing your skin as you settle on a grassy hill. The town's glow, a distant flicker below. You can still picture Will's steady hands stirring those cleaner troughs, his face etched with pride despite the town's sneers. You see Thomas by his stream, his hood off his eyes, tracing the water's flow, perhaps free of the ag at last. Ella's tune hums in your memory, defiant yet soft, and Jem's bold grin lingers a spark that might light a new path. Their lives, their struggles, their quiet rebellions, they've woven a tapestry you've walked through, and now it's time to let it rest. History whispers, one final truth: outcasts, like tanners and executioners, were the unseen pillars of medieval life. Their work, leather, justice holding the town together even as it pushed them to the edges. By the 15th century, their crafts began to shift cleaner methods and new laws, softening their stigma, though never fully erasing it. You imagine Will's troughs, spreading Thomas's garden, growing, and feel a warmth knowing their efforts rippled beyond their time. Their legacy isn't in stone, but in the boots that walk these streets, the order that keeps them safe. You shift on the grass, the earth solid beneath you, and think of the river, that brown, burdened flow that carried the tanner's toil. It's quieter now in your mind's eye, reflecting starlight, as if it's found peace too. You chuckle softly, imagining Will joking about lavender fields, or Thomas whittling a bird that finally flies. That's your first laugh, gentle, like a breeze lifting a leaf. Their defiance, their endurance. It's not gone, it's here in the town's pulse, in the way you've carried their story with you. A quirky note to ease you further: some tanners believed their leather could hold memories that a well-crafted belt might whisper its maker's hopes. No proof, of course, but you like the idea. Ella's scraps, Will's hides, carrying their dreams into the future. Historians still ponder whether outcasts knew their worth, if they saw their work as vital or just endured it. You believe they did, in their quiet way, as you recall Jem's swagger, Thomas's candle, each a claim to matter. You stretch the grass, tickling your palms, and let your thoughts drift to the tavern where Hal and Thomas shared ale, or to Ella's hum, a melody that might outlive her. You chuckle again, picturing Jem trying to charm the stars themselves. That's your second laugh, a whisper of joy for their spirit. Their world feels closer now, not a distant past, but a story you've lived step by step through every pit, every swing, every stolen moment of warmth. The night deepens, the stars brighter, and you feel a calm settle like a blanket pulled snug. You think of the gallows empty now, and the tannery, its troughs, a promise of less poison. You laugh one last time, soft as a sigh, imagining Ella teaching her own children, that tune passing on her fire. That's your third chuckle, a farewell to their fight, a nod to their place in this endless story. You're ready to rest now, the town's lights blurring into a soft glow. Their faces, Will's resolve, Thomas's weariness, Ella's hope, Jem's daring, fade gently, not into darkness, but into a peaceful dream. You've walked their paths, felt their burdens, and carried their light. Now it's time to let go, to drift into sleep with their story tucked close. Thank you for being with me through every emotion, every wonderful moment of this journey. It has been an adventure, and I am so grateful to have shared it with you. As we close this story, I wish you a peaceful evening, filled with dreams, filled with wonder and goodness. Rest well, you deserve it. And when you are ready for the next story, I will be here waiting to accompany you again.